ये एक मंजिल है तो रास्ते भी होंगे और एक मेंटर भी जो मुश्किलों को आसान बना दे। नतीजे संयोग नहीं होते, दूसरों से बेहतर स्कोर होते हैं। GS Score, an institute for civil services.
Good career is a process, and mentoring at GS Score is driven by primarily two objectives. One is empowerment and another is excellence. This is what we are known for.
कामयाबी की राह पर 1000 से भी ज्यादा निशान। GS Score.
Hello, my name is Dhruv Advani. I've gotten AIR 5 in NEET UG 2023 with a score of 715 marks. I've also obtained Karnataka rank 1. So my journey started of NEET preparation started in 11th standard, where I joined Akash coaching in 10th, but I joined this NEET coaching program in 11th grade. Talking about the paper this year, basically the paper was mostly quite straightforward. But there were a few assertion reason type questions which were characteristic of the previous AIMS pattern tests. But overall the paper was, I would say, easy to medium. And there were of course hard questions, but overall it was, I'd say, in the medium range. And so the manner in which I attempted the paper, and I believe everyone should attempt the paper, is I started with biology, then moved on to chemistry and then physics. So in biology I would spend around 15 to 20 minutes just solving the paper, no bubbling, just solving the paper, ticking the right options or writing it on the back. And next I would do chemistry, same thing, around I'd say half an hour for chemistry. Then when I had physics left, I would take around 45 minutes to 1 hour for physics at the end. In the start I used to take 1 hour 15 minutes completely for physics. But by the end of my preparation, I was taking around 45 minutes and most times actually around 35 minutes. To complete the physics section. Once I was done with all 3 sections, I would check the paper once again. Every single question I would go through, ensure that I've read it correctly, that I've applied the correct formula, I've gotten the correct answer, and I've written or ticked the correct answer, the correct option. And then I would bubble the OMR. My preferred strategy while preparing was bubbling the OMR section wise. I check one section and then bubble it. But during the NEET exam, what happened was the way my center was structured, I was unable to flip back and forth. So in my coaching institute, we were told to envision the worst case scenario. And that was that you have to keep flipping back and forth. You can't take anything on the question paper. You have to flip back to the rough sheet, write the answer and then flip back. So we were trained to do that in one page. We would write all of our 1 to 200 questions. Every single option would be written and we would do all of our rough work on that one sheet. But because of the conditions in my center, I was unable to follow that strategy. So what I did was I ticked the options and then as I checked them, I bubbled them simultaneously, page-wise. So this just goes to show that no matter how much you prepare, or the exam center will be different from what you expected. At least a little bit, it could be a lot like it was in my case. So I would suggest when you're preparing for how to attempt the exam, prepare every possible strategy. Prepare with half a table and you've kept 5 different documents on that table. Prepare with, you can't tick on the question paper, so you have to move back and forth. Tick with, you only have the space given in the sides of the questions for rough work and no rough sheet at all. Anything can happen. So basically, when you're preparing for the actual exam, like your strategy you're developing, prepare with every scenario in mind, including the best case and the worst case scenarios. Now I come to my subject-wise strategy. So firstly, biology. In biology and basically all subjects, NCERT is your Bible, but especially in bio. We were told to read the bio textbook as many times as possible. So in 11th grade, I focused mostly on the coaching packages because I was not aware as much about the importance of NCERT. But once 12th grade started and we finished the portions and started revision again, all we did was do NCERT. Because even this year, 99% of the questions were from NCERT. Only a handful, like the one or two questions were outside of NCERT. And yeah, that's it. So NCERT is your main preparatory book in biology, in chemistry, in physics, but especially in biology. Read every single line as well as possible. basically by heart it, जितना हो सकता है उतना रट्टा करना है NCERT को, और साथ ही साथ you have to understand the concept also. जैसे कि बायो में concept based learning especially human physiology chapters में बहुत सारी है, तो तब you need to understand the concepts properly, how the system functions, what is regulating what, which organ is functioning in which situation. That is very important, and simultaneously you need to learn the intricate lines of NCERT, because there's a lot of stuff that you wouldn't think of intuitively. There are some lines that are given that you would interpret differently if you did not know that they're already there in the NCERT. So for bio, my strategy was mainly just read the NCERT perfectly near the end. At the start, it was understand the concept as much as possible, go as in depth as you are interested, and in the end, just focus on the NCERT level. Read the NCERT perfectly, and that's about it for biology. Now coming to chemistry, chemistry has three major parts. There's physical chemistry, there's inorganic and organic chemistry. So personally for me, physical chemistry was the easiest out of the three, because it was very similar to physics but like a tamped down version. All we had to do, it was formula based and you could understand the concepts very easily, relatively. So physical chemistry wasn't much of a challenge for me. I just did whatever was given in class. I didn't actually read the NCERT until very late. But what I did was I solved questions regularly in those specific in the first 6 chapters of 11th and the first 6 chapters of 12th, which are not first 4 chapters of 12th, which are purely physical chemistry. So if you solve questions, pay attention in classes, and of course read the NCERT, then your concepts will be clear and physical is easily done. Next is organic chemistry. Now organic chemistry, normally if you are attempting an exam like JEE mains or JEE advanced, there is no limit to the amount of organic chemistry you have to learn, because there is no limit to what they can ask. But in NEET, and organic chemistry or anything is limited to the NCERT. So focus on your NCERT again properly. Learn the mechanisms of how everything is happening. For example, in the first, I think GOC, General Organic Chemistry, there is different mechanisms. There's free radical substitution, there's addition reactions, substitution reactions, eliminations. Understand those properly, and then basically you are just learning the reactions and you are just building on the knowledge you already have. There's nothing new that you're learning, so it makes it a lot easier to understand and digest organic chemistry, because it can be looking at it may seem daunting. There's a lot of structures to learn, a lot of names, but if you start doing it in more of a concept based manner rather than I have to ratta this ye mere ko memorize karna hai, to फिर it's a lot better. Basically what I did personally for organic chemistry was GOC I understood very well, and hydrocarbons onwards I found it a lot easier than I'd found GOC, because in GOC there's a lot of concept to learn. It's a concept heavy chapter, but once you start hydrocarbons and then move on to haloalkanes, haloarenes, and then alcohols, phenols, ethers, all of these are specific reactions, and once you've learned the concept, you already know the reaction. Basically you're just learning the specific name for it, or you're visualizing that reaction actually. So basically build your concepts clearly and read the NCERT properly. That's your organic chemistry strategy. For inorganic chemistry, unfortunately, there's nothing you can do other than ratta it. You can figure out the logic behind it, and that helps a bit. But fundamentally, there's just, especially in 12th grade, there's too many exceptions in P block and DNF block for you to truly understand, because the level we're learning is not high enough to truly understand the trends that we're learning. We learn about, let's say, lanthanoid contraction and actinoid contraction, but that's just one of the many factors that affects every single property, melting point, boiling point, anything in ionization enthalpy. In DNF block elements, when we had to memorize the orders of the ionization enthalpy, I made a flow chart from 21 to 30. For the first ionization enthalpy, I drew some arrows, and I remember that diagram rather than remembering the actual order. And I did the same for basically everything. In melting point and boiling point, I remembered the graphs that were given in the NCERT. And that's how basically figure out what works for you. If you're a visual learner, then the graphs are very helpful and the diagrams are very helpful. If you're more of a practical based learner, then conduct the activities. Make an interactive system where you can move it around and visualize the order properly. And that's about it for inorganic. Basically, you need to figure out a system that works for you to help you memorize it, because it's very fact heavy and there's not much logic behind it. Next, I'm coming to my strategy for physics. So when I was preparing for physics, actually our teacher told us a very good strategy, which was to make a formula book or a formula sheet. Basically for every chapter, what we would do is at the end of the chapter, once we learned everything, we'd understood the concepts, then we would sit down and make a sheet or a few papers having all the formulae of that chapter. And actually, because physics in NEET especially is simultaneously concept heavy and numerical based. So if you're learning for numericals, you need formulae at the tips of your fingers. And if you're thinking about the concept, every time you're going for a numerical, you're relating back to the concept, trying to derive the formula in your head, that gets a little bit time consuming. And you don't have that much time especially in the NEET exam, where you have to solve so many questions in such limited time to think that much. So basically what we used to do is, my class, we used to make a formula book. And I think this is quite a common, quite a common strategy. So prepare formula books based on your understanding. And ensure that you are only preparing that formula book once you've finished properly understanding the concept. Because if you're just by hearting the formulas without any understanding of the formula and where it's used, that will lead to more errors down the line. So understand the concept. If you have any doubts, ask your teachers, ask your peers, go online and watch some YouTube videos. There are infinite number of sources that we have to help us. So just utilize those, understand every single concept, and then make your formula book. And that formula book, I think, was very important for me. And the other part was practice questions. Because physics, you should definitely read the NCERT. But more than anything, when you're studying physics, you need to solve questions. Because you will only understand the context of the things you're learning once you've solved the questions and you've had a practical application. There's no point of looking at a physics textbook in the NCERT and thinking, okay, so if a projectile is thrown, it will go in this path in this manner. When you solve a question, you'll understand that, okay, the equation of trajectory is a parabola. It's moving in this manner because of the manner of the forces that are acting on it. And this is true for any concept. And I believe that's about it for physics. Basically, just ensure that you're understanding your concepts properly, utilize the resources you have, and solve as many practice questions as possible. Further, make a formula book. Make it easy for you to remember stuff. Now I'd like to come to how you tackle difficult subjects. For me personally, there was no subject that was difficult. It was more, there were a few topics throughout the 2 years that became a bit hard for me to learn as such. For example, in physics, I had a bit of trouble with the fluid dynamics initially, because I was just not able to visualize it at first. I was thinking of them as individual particles. But when I stopped that and I started looking at the bigger picture, it helped me. So here, the lesson I learned was you need to change your thinking strategy sometimes, which could mean that you need to look at a different source from what you're learning. For example, if your teacher is teaching you in one manner and you're not understanding no matter how many times they're explaining, maybe you need to go online and look at a YouTube video, or ask a peer to explain it to you in the way that they see it, or read the NCERT textbook and see what they've given there. Because everyone has a different style of learning and every teacher has a different style of teaching. Everything may not work for you. You need to find out because there's nothing that's unlearnable. Our brains are amazing biological marvels. We have the capacity to learn anything in this world. It's just the way in which it is taught to us, or the way in which we approach things. That is the only thing we need to change sometimes in order to actually get the best result best output from our studies. And I believe that's about it. For any difficulties also, I would suggest don't panic about it, because when you build it up in your head that I don't know this topic, that becomes a huge issue. Then you'll always have that underconfidence that I don't know this topic. It doesn't matter how many times you've done it. So that's very important. Keep confidence in yourself and be comforted in the fact that you have a whole 2 years for preparation. You're spending so much time, and even if you don't understand it now, later on you will. There might be a small thing that you learn later on that will help connect this entire concept in your mind. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind. Don't get panicked. The course is vast, but it's not too vast. It's doable, provided you take it in parts. Don't look at it as an overwhelming task that you're doing. Enjoy the subjects. I truly love the science subjects that I've taken. Physics, chemistry, biology, all of them were absolutely amazing for me. And I think that is also one very important factor in my success, that I truly enjoyed the subjects I was learning. I enjoyed going to classes and learning about it, because it feels like we're unlocking the secrets of the universe. And to me, that is honestly the most amazing thing that we can do as humans. And that's like you need to find your motivation for doing what you're studying. I study medicine because I love biology. In my opinion, like, life is one of the few unique things about this earth, right? As of right now, like, based on the knowledge we know, life is completely unique to earth, and it has infinite complexity. We have single celled organisms that can perform the same functions that we can. We have such specialized cells, trillions of cells in our body, and that's just a very interesting field to me. And the second is, I've always wanted to help people. It's a service oriented, I've always wanted to go into service oriented field, and that's why I chose medicine. Now, everyone might have different reasons for choosing medicine, but engineering, whatever you're choosing. But a very important factor is you need to be truly passionate about what you're choosing. Otherwise, it's impossible to study these subjects, not just in 11th, 12th, even later on, because it's a long journey. It doesn't end quickly. So that's also one important advice. Take enjoyment in what you're learning and find your passion. Do only what you're passionate about. And I believe that's about it. So now I'd like to talk about my pre-exam strategy. The 1 month before exam, 1 week and 1 day. So 1 month before exam, while I was in Akash Institute, we had an intensive test series. And simultaneously, we also had another test series going on. So we asked our teachers to give us 2 tests a day in order to practice. And I believe that's the best strategy. Whether or not you're in a specific coaching institute or anything, just writing as many mock tests as possible in that last 1 month. That's the most important thing for me, because that will help reduce your errors and help you realize where you're going wrong. I think by the end of 2 years, you've done 2 years of preparation, you've studied the portions. When that last month comes, ideally you should not need to touch the NCERT books anymore. If you have like maybe 1 or 2 concepts to revise, then okay, but you should not be starting anything from scratch. You should plan your preparation such that you're done by the time you're coming to that last month. In that last month, my batch, all I did was I wrote exams. And if there was a concept that maybe I was a bit unsure about, then I'd come back from the exam, look at it, and that's it. There was no theory study. In the last 1 week, actually, we were doing pretty much the same thing. Just writing exams, as many exams as possible, solving questions, not looking at theory, especially in the last week of before NEET. Because up until the last month, everyone will have the desire, okay, now the exam's coming close, now I need to revise this, I don't know this. But the thing is, especially in the last week, you need to completely stop looking at your textbooks. If you don't know something at that point, you cannot learn it in that last week, in my opinion. Because all you're doing is you're creating anxiety for the concepts you don't know, and you're affecting your performance in the concept that you do know, that you are confident about. So in the last week, I didn't open my textbooks even once. All I did was solve questions, and I actually relaxed a lot in that last week, de-stressing a bit. And 2 days before the exam, we had our exams ended 3 days before the NEET exam. So 2 days before, I went out for shopping with my family and basically just enjoyed myself. 1 day before NEET exam, I did pretty much the same thing. I sat at home, I talked to my friends, my family, my sister, and basically just did a lot of time pass, because that last 2 days is not about stressing about the exam. You've prepared enough for it. What you need to do is calm yourself down, because this is a highly stressful environment. It's a 1 day exam, and that 1 day should not, obviously that anxiety is there in everyone, that 1 day should not go wrong, right? So what you need to do is relax yourself, calm yourself down, especially in the last 1 or 2 days before NEET. And our teacher told us, don't look at anything after 5 p.m. Don't study anything or anything academic, don't look at it after 5 p.m. on the day before NEET. And we followed that too much. We did it from 2 days before NEET. And actually that really helped me out, because I was anxious on the day of NEET just before the exam, but it was manageable. It was not too much. It's very easy to get overwhelmed, especially in the last days. So take care about that. Make sure you're relaxing yourself and calming yourself down. And lastly, set realistic expectations, because I went into the exam wanting to get 720. And when I went in, there were a few questions that I didn't get on the first read. And I got a bit worried. But because I'd set realistic expectations, that's okay, 1 or 2 questions may go wrong. It's fine. That's why I was able to handle it. But I know people who didn't do that. They got extremely anxious in the test, and rather than getting based on the practice test, their expected score would have been somewhere 700 above at the minimum, but they got in the 650s because they got very anxious. So more than your preparation, what matters is your time management and your stress management in the exam hall. Alright, now coming to my exam hall strategy. Once you actually get to the exam hall, you need to be prepared for the possibility that anything can go wrong and stuff will go wrong. Just entering into the center is a bit of a rough process. When you're getting scanned, you need to have your passport photos, your 2 passport size photos, your Aadhaar card, everything. So just be prepared with the documents, have a list ready, and be very careful about the dress code because there's no collar t-shirts allowed and there's nothing metal allowed. So just be very careful about the requirements before you get to NEET. Ensure that you've done everything carefully. Once you've sat down inside the exam hall, actual exam hall, basically I would suggest don't think about academics. Just wait, I would say distract yourself until the exam comes, because there's I think around a half an hour waiting period between when you actually get to the exam hall and when the exam starts, and in that time it's very easy to get a bit worried there again. So just manage your stress, and once the exam starts, be ready to change your strategy at any point, because my strategy was always I would write my answers, the questions and answers on the last page, the one rough sheet we were given, and solve everything there and flip back and forth. But I couldn't do that in the exam center, so what I ended up having to do was ticking, and obviously that cost me a bit of my time because I was not used to that. I was much more efficient at my strategy. So be ready to change anything. Don't get ruffled don't get nervous if they make you, if there's some limitation at the exam center that causes you to change everything you were doing. Just take it in stride, move along, and do your best. Finally, all you can do in that exam hall is do your best. Your best need not be the best. Just try as hard as you can. You worked hard for this, and that's about it. Now I'll come to my personal preparation in the 2 years, how much I used to study and everything. So we used to have classes from 9 to 5, and I was in an Akash integrated program, which was actually very wonderful for me. So in those 9 to 5 classes, I would pay proper attention. I'd work hard. Whatever was required of us, I'd do it properly. And once the classes were over, I'd come home and I'd relax, because I'm a classroom learner. If a teacher has taught me something, then I rarely tend to, and I've understood it, I rarely tend to need to do anything extra. So what I would do is I would do the classes properly, and we had problem solving sessions structured into our program itself. So I'd solve questions also in school, I'd finish the theory part also in school. I'd come home by around 5:30, relax for around 1 hour. Then I live in an apartment, so I'd go down, I'd play basketball, I'd talk to my friends, I'd roam around for a few hours. Then I'd come back and basically eat dinner and sleep. And this was on normal days. If there was an exam coming up in Akash or in school, if there was an exam coming up within the next few days, if there was anything I needed to revise, then I'd come home and I'd revise that for a few hours. But I tried not to spend too much time at home, because I was already doing enough in school. I didn't need to do that much at home, because my school preparation was perfect for me. But the important thing is that might not work for everyone. So you need to figure out what works for you. What worked for me was doing everything in school as well as I can, coming home, relaxing, and allowing myself to basically enjoy, so that my brain can be fresh for the next day. And that worked very well for me. But again, find your own strategy. Don't blindly apply what anyone else is doing, because that will ultimately lead to that's destructive rather than being productive. So that's my main preparation strategy. I didn't have a set amount of hours I studied in one day. It was very mood based and need based. If I needed to study a topic, or if there was an exam coming, then I would study. But if I felt like I needed to go down and play, or just basically do time pass, and I'd do that. It was purely mood and need based. I didn't have a strict rigid study schedule, because that's never worked for me. I don't like making strict schedules that you have to follow. To me, that's just unnecessary work. So while I was in Akash coaching, and that was definitely very great for me, not everyone would wish to go into coaching or will be able to go into coaching. And for those who can't, I'd say it's not a great loss. You can do it without the coaching as well. You just need to find your resources well. So I have a lot of friends who've done it self-study and done it without any coaching, purely with school. And what I've heard is they would find practice tests online and give as many as they could. They'd solve questions in some reference books. I personally did not use any reference books outside of NCERT and the Akash packages, but I don't have much idea about these books. However, self-study, again, you just need to remain dedicated for the 2 years. Other than that, there's a very slight difference that a coaching makes, because they provide you with directed learning, but self-study can do it. Definitely, it can be done. There's no limitation at all. Now I'll come to a topic I think all of us are very interested in. Social media. I mean, over the 2 years, I've had a lot of friends who left social media, or who just stopped having a life, basically left social media, stopped talking to friends, stopped enjoying themselves. And I didn't do that at all. I was active on Instagram throughout the 2 years. I had Snapchat at one point. I just got bored of it. I used to I used to meet with friends regularly. I'd play basketball. I'd play volleyball sometimes. Basically, I enjoyed. It was not like I had to put the rest of my life on hold just to prepare for NEET. It was simultaneous. You can do everything. You just have to structure it well into your schedule. You have to figure out what works for you. So for me, what I did was, again, same thing. I'd come home, play, but I was active on Instagram throughout the 2 years, because it never became a distraction for me, as well as on other forms of social media like Discord, Reddit sometimes, Tumblr, etc. And that was because they never became a distraction for me. I was always able to control myself, stop myself when I needed to. It was never like, oh, this is becoming too much of a distraction, you're spending too much time here. And I think the primary reason behind that is not that social media is not inherently addictive. It definitely is. It's very easy to get distracted. But the thing was, I had a passion for what I was learning, and that was equally, if not more addictive than scrolling through Instagram, liking reels or posts or whatever. So that's why my interest was more towards I was not too obsessed with social media. I was able to manage having an active Instagram account and having Snapchat, having Reddit, having Discord and Tumblr and Pinterest. Basically every form of social media that was possible, I used it for at least some point during the 2 years. And it never was a problem for me, because I managed my time effectively. It never became a distraction for me, because I never let it become a distraction. It was always controlled. I also watched a lot of shows and read a lot of novels during the 2 years, because I needed that. For me, stress relief is very important, because our brains are organs fundamentally. They get tired, and if you're studying, let's say 6 hours a day or 12 hours a day, your brain beyond some point, you're not processing what you're studying, you're just sitting in front of the book. At least for me, that's the situation. So I would use a lot of outlets for stress relief, so that my brain would always be primed and ready to go. So even though if you take an average on the days that I didn't study at all after school and the days that I studied properly because there were exams coming, I would say there was an average of 2 to 3 hours a day of studies outside of school. I focused properly in school, came home, average. If you were to average it out, around 2 to 3 hours of study per day. And that was working for me, because that was enough. My brain was completely active during those 2-3 hours. I did it perfectly with proper dedication, and once that was done, I was completely done studying. I would enjoy myself after that. I watched I think around 20-30 shows, watched a few movies, read around almost 160 novels in 11th and 56 novels in 12th, and I did a lot of extracurricular activities as well. So just NEET preparation does not mean you can't do anything else. It means that you're preparing for an exam that's very important, definitely, but it also means that it's also simultaneously that you're in 11th grade or 12th grade. These are like supposed to be the best school years of your life. So you need to enjoy while simultaneously studying. And finally and fundamentally, you need to figure out what works for you. If social media is too much of a distraction, then definitely you shouldn't use it too much. There's no point in that. But if you can handle it, if you believe you can, and it works for you, then definitely you should enjoy everything you can do. Because this time will never come again. This is a completely different experience. So now, one last thing I would like to say is that when we're simultaneously preparing for NEET, for boards, and if we're interested in Olympiads. So like, for example, I've recently been selected as one of the 4 individuals who will represent India in the 34th International Biology Olympiad.
which is going to be held in Abu Dhabi. And when you're giving these simultaneously, many wonder, how do you prepare for these? For me, it was just, I didn't do anything special for any of these. I prepared in the same way for CBSE boards as I did for NEET, which was, I made my concepts crystal clear. I understood everything that there was to understand as well as I could. And then it became easy, because if there's let's say you're writing CBSE boards, that has pretty much the same portion as NEET. The style of exam is different, so you write a few mock papers, you get used to the pattern, and that's about it. You don't need to study anything extra. Similarly, when you're going for Olympiads are a bit more concept heavy and course heavy, because it's not limited to what we learn in 11th and 12th. For biology Olympiad, it's based on the Campbell biology book, which is it's a huge book. It has a lot of concepts in it. But the thing is, most of those questions in Olympiads are analysis based rather than concept based. So I didn't need to read that much in Campbell biology either. What I did was, my concepts were clear, and because the question is analysis based, there's nothing to ratta in, there's very little to ratta in Olympiads. I would utilize the knowledge I already had and make predictions, because fundamentally what you do in science is pattern recognition, and that's what human brains are primed to be good at. So that's why Olympiads, that's how it works. You don't need, in my situation at least, I didn't need to do anything extra for those Olympiads. I've worked on what I was doing for NEET and CBSE boards, and that was it. It just worked for me. And lastly, I would just like to say all the best to everyone for whatever you're preparing for. It's a hard journey, but you will get there. And finally, you'll look back on it with a lot of fondness. It's going to be a two years that you'll miss. You're going to make friends that will never come again. You're going to learn things that will be amazingly interesting, that you may never apply, but just knowing them will be a pleasure. And that's about it. Thank you so much.